Hi, good morning. This is the Bitcoin Morning Brief. I'm Leah Wald. We have Giacomo on today. Tone Vase is over there. Tone, Barbie Buys Dips put some very good-looking pictures of you up yesterday. Well, I think may have been a couple days ago, but they're pretty epic. Can you do the picture that she had up there?
Wait, I must have missed it. Like, she didn't tag me in them.
I may pull it
Was,
up.
hold on. I'm going to her profile. Which one are we talking? Oh, is that me raising the shirt like that?
Oh,
yeah. The white shirt. Yeah.
You're gonna get doxxed again. Good. All right, we're off to a solid Friday.
Hey, Barbie,
Giacomo,
thanks for the shout out.
Giacomo, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. And just after I explained the political stale situation to you guys yesterday, they immediately ended it, appointed the government. So we just unlocked the situation here. That was great.
It was because I think they watched the Bitcoin Morning Brief.
That for sure.
So sorry, guys. I totally had bad audio. Somebody should have told me. Isn't this better now?
It's good.
Yeah, it was low, not so bad, just low.
Good. Maybe it's your voice. Okay, I'll stop.
No, I had the wrong audio setup.
All right. Well, everybody, I am in Washington, D.C., as we know, so I picked a lot of politics stories today, whether you like it or not. But our first story is Bittrex. So let's start us off. And here we go. All right. Bittrex gets bank agreement to help you buy Bitcoin with dollars. This has definitely been in the news recently from various companies. But Bittrex here is going to work with Signature Bank and other financial firms to offer fiat trading to corporate users. And just as a background, right, Bittrex users swap nearly 200 different digital coins, and they have more than 3 million customers globally. The firm said that the pact will let corporate users in some states buy virtual tokens by using dollars, and that, a move that could help the trading venue bring in more users is what they said. And it's launching the fiat trading on Thursday for Bitcoin, Tether, and True USD, our favorites. Tone, what did you think about the story?
I mean, it's one of those things like we've mentioned before. What was the story the other day? It's like, it's got to be like a slow news day, right? Like,
circle.
like, why is this news? Like, a crypto exchange, Poloniex gets bought out. I mean, back after Cryptsy exit scammed, all there was for, shitcoin trading was Bittrex and Poloniex. And then, some of the outskirts like HitBTC and a couple others, right? But it was mostly Bittrex and Poloniex competing with each other. Today, Coinbase is joining them, and Binance is there. And there's a lot of other competition. So if you're a US-based altcoin exchange, you got to find a way to compete. So, I'm sure Bittrex would have been very happy to get bought out by Circle. That went to Poloniex. So Bittrex is going to try to get bought out. And if not, hey, they found a bank. Congratulations. The article stated that what do you call them? Coinbase has like 4 banks. I don't know why they didn't approach one of them. Like, if you're a centralized company, right? You got to do the proper KYC. You got to do the proper, AML compliance. As much as I hate it, you have to do a compliance. And if you can prove to the banks that you're compliant with all of the financial laws, I mean, there are banking relationships you can create. Of all the crypto news Bloomberg can focus on, I have no idea why they chose this. I really don't.
Or I chose it, I guess. That's very
well,
true.
No, I mean, it's Bloomberg, right? That's
yeah, and it was really the only Bloomberg crypto story today and in the past couple of days. So I did want to throw it up there. Especially
because they could have covered me on Cheddar from the New York Stock Exchange yesterday. My outlook on the price seems to have stirred up all kinds of nonsense on Twitter.
True, but maybe they didn't notice that it was you because you weren't wearing your Buy the Dip t-shirt. So, there's that potential.
They got a dress code on the floor. Uh-huh. No, I was going to dress up nice regardless, but they do have a dress code.
How can you be a revolutionary if you care about a dress code? I'm just going to leave it there and switch to Giacomo with the real question that I wanted to ask on this piece, which is, why do you think that, they added more fiat, and isn't the crypto over crypto niche interesting enough?
I think that the reason that all these crypto over crypto exchange end up adding fiat is that basically the big market is onboarding right now. Of course, traders can do a lot of money, but prospectively and strategically, the great market to capture is onboarding of all the fiat part of the population, including institutional investors. I would say on Bitcoin because that's what makes sense. But for somebody a little bit more confused by the hype, it would be on crypto. And actually, well, a little bit as Tom said, if you are going to be compliant, then there is no reason to just be cut out of the most relevant kind of market, which is fiat to Bitcoin onboarding. So if you assume that you are going to stay a dodgy, shady, non-compliant, non-KYC, non-AML exchange. In that case, the approach to stay crypto over crypto and to avoid regulation entirely, that could be interesting because at least you save a lot. You can serve a different market and you can save compliance costs. And that's the reason that you're not going to do fiat because you can't open a bank account basically. But if you give up all the advantages of being non-compliant, like these exchanges were, so if you open up a centralized company, a legal entity, and you start to do KYC AML, so there is no reason left to exclude the most relevant market, which is Bitcoin from fiat onboarding. And also the second thing is that prospectively, crypto over crypto, assuming that the altcoin craziness will last for many years, which I don't really think, but assuming it will, prospectively, crypto over crypto can be served well enough and without any kind of regulation by atomic swap technologies, which are very, very early stage right now, but eventually there is no reason to use a centralized entity for switching unless you want something big, efficient, reliable, compliant, regulated, which in this case can also add fiat to the deal.
Yeah, Giacomo, that's a good point, right? Like when it comes to like doing this stuff, you got to choose. You either got to be like 110% compliant, like Coinbase, who I think wasn't compliant enough because they were supposed to inform you of every trade you ever did, and they were supposed to report every single trade to the IRS. This is what every other exchange does. This is what Interactive Brokers does, where my trading account has been for a while, and all the other exchanges, right? So you either got to be 110% compliant, or you got to be 0% compliant, and then you got to be like BTCE, where you don't touch any banks, you don't touch any crypto. Well, when you try to be this in-between thing, it's a total disaster.
I agree. Yeah, it's really a choice of market niche. If you are trying to serve the underserved, then you are just going to need to avoid compliance at all, and probably avoid a good chunk of profits because you have to stay decentralized, stay anonymous or pseudonymous.
Right, you gotta have an exchange. You gotta have you can't have a corporation. You can't have a domicile. You can't have an office. You gotta have a bunch of people that are programming stuff. You're not going to be able to use something like Alpha Point as your back end.
Exactly.
You have to build it all yourself, and you're going to have to be totally uncompliant.
And in a way, you cannot even really ICO or ask VC money.
Oh, you can ICO. You can totally ICO. In that case, an ICO makes total sense.
Yeah, but only if you can provide to your investors some kind of technical enforceability of rights, which is still very, very hard to do.
Oh, no, you don't need to. You're non-compliant. You don't need to provide any rights at all, right? You can just go and ICO.
Oh, so you say, okay, and ask for donations to the
Right. I mean, that's a use case for an actual ICO.
Yeah, I get your point. You cannot make a reliable ICO, which will necessarily require
right. I mean, all you got to do is convince the public that, well, it's on Ethereum, therefore it's decentralized, therefore we can't print anymore, right? I mean, they're all buying this stuff now. As a non-compliant exchange, ICOing for the funding is your perfect way to do so. I mean, you are at risk of Ethereum rolling back your ICO.
Thank you,
For being non-compliant on the Ethereum blockchain.
Thank you. And to answer everybody in the live chat, that is exactly why I picked this piece today, because Giacomo always throws us curveballs. And I think that was a really interesting take. Taking back power, and upstart government plans to tokenize energy. So we are starting off this kind of Bitcoin politics news brief today. So tiny update on what's up in Spain and Catalonia, right? The, Rajoy was ousted in Spain. They had a no confidence vote this morning, actually. So very recent news. And Sanchez, the leader of the main opposition Socialist Party, is set to replace him as prime minister as soon as potentially this weekend. Now to Catalonia, their two biggest pro-independence party, which is PDE's CAT and the Catalonia Republic left, lent their support to Sanchez. And Sanchez is a successful attempt to unseat Rajoy. I'm trying to understand all this one, and will be keen to probably get something in return, right? That's kind of what I think. So we'll see what happens there. So with this story, all right, because it'll tie right in. The Catalonian government, or Catalan government, plans to airdrop an ERC token, and they're calling it ION, or ION. The plan is to incentivize solar power generation by circumventing the rules that have been made by Madrid, so in the government. So the article explains that peer-to-peer energy trading in Spain is limited by rules preventing consumers who produce solar energy to sell the excess power back to the national grid or share it with other users, which we do in other countries. So really quick overview on this ION, or ION, whatever, acronyms. So the quantities given out will vary between 100 and 5,000 IONs, depending on the user's engagement, and again, is an ERC20 token. They're going to cap it, which is supposed to mirror the kilowatt hours per year that are produced currently by Catalonia's combined nuclear power plants. The wallet is still under development, and these tokens can be traded on the secondary market. Okay, a lot going on. Giacomo, also with this crazy political situation, can they pull this off? And what do you think?
So I'm a big, politically speaking, I'm really close to these guys. I mean, I'm all for decentralization of nation states and disruption of nation states and independentism, and it was horrible what happened in Catalonia with police beating up old ladies and all. So I understand the motivation. I met some of these guys, some of Catalanian activists. I met them in CCC conference, and they were talking about censorship resistance technology more in general, more from an hacker point of view. So mesh networks, how to circumvent the censorship over the Catalonian institution websites. So how to use Tor, how to use Freenet, how to communicate. So there are serious concerns. On one side, I think that the use case for let's call it crypto, in order to circumvent a political regime oppression or censorship is the right use case. So I think that their heart is in the good place, in the right place, and the idea of using this kind of technology in order to overcome or bypass or dodge political impositions and regulations is the use case. Unfortunately, probably these people they are political activists, and they are not technology experts. And if they started to this kind of effort 3 years ago, probably they would be doing something reasonable. If they were starting this kind of activity in 3 years from now, maybe they would do something realistic. Right now, they are unfortunate. They are unlucky enough to be in the between of the shitcoin, random, meaningless blockchain technology hype, and so what they are doing doesn't make, sadly, any sense at all. So the problem with technology is not really to have tokens representing the ownership of the kilowatt hour. The problem is to decentralize the physical distribution network, which is basically impossible. You cannot build an electric mesh network, not now with solar power. But even if you can do that, then the problem is not tokenization at all. you can just use people paying. I mean, I have a solar panel. I just need a cable that can sell electricity to you. You just pay me with Bitcoin if needed, and then I give you the electricity. If we want to do something trustless and real time, let's use a payment channel for that, if we really want to. But there is no technology problem that the token can solve in this context. And most of all, there is no technology problem that a shitty token on a broken platform like an Ethereum ERC20 can solve in this context. So again, it's cool that Catalanian people are trying to explore technology in order to avoid and circumvent censorship. An ERC20 token for energy is just like the perfect empty buzzword.
Thank you, Giacomo. And very interesting that you're close to them. Maybe you can advise them. Tone, what did you think when you read this piece?
Oh God, this was terrible. It's like it's really bad. Like it's hard to describe how stupid the ION token is. So I mean, again, they want to print their own money. I don't understand the difference between the ION token and the Petro, which we're going to talk about in the next story. Like, it's the same thing. Like, just sell the damn electricity, right? Like, at one point in this article, they're like, our goal is for one day for one ion to equal 1 kilowatt of electricity. So just open up a market. How much does 1 kilowatt of electricity cost in a currency that already exists? Not the one you're about to create, right? All they're doing is creating a currency, and they're like making up as many excuses as they can why they need to print their own currency and tie it to the production of solar energy. This token is totally useless for anything. Just like right now, several countries allow you to, generate solar energy and sell it back into the grid. Like, they're complaining that Madrid doesn't let them do that. Fine, change the law. Allow people to sell their electricity back into the grid and for other people to buy that electricity and charge per 1 kilowatt hour, or maybe 1/10 of a kilowatt hour, right? Create another unit. But why the hell are you creating another currency? All it comes down to a bunch of guys want to justify their existence by either printing money for themselves or having a job that requires them to maintain the printing of a brand new money, right? They're building it on top of the Ethereum platform, which gave us this nightmare of, a platform that was created by printing your own money and maintaining the printing of your own money. Like, none of it makes sense, right? What the hell are you going to do if you actually integrate this ION token into the electricity grid of your, new formed country, and Ethereum goes belly up and your electricity doesn't work anymore because no one can transfer this token around? This is totally stupid. This can be completely centralized. It will be 1,000 times more efficient without the printing of your own money.
Yeah, I agree with on almost anything except that Catalonian institution, they cannot change the law because that's what they try to do with the referendum.
Well, no. I'm saying if they break off and they are their own country, they can set any law they like.
Yeah. But since they haven't managed to do that. So the idea to use technology in order to circumvent present limitation is itself, in theory,
so they're breaking the law, right? Like,
or they are breaking Spanish law, following. They are circumventing Spanish law. What I don't agree with you about is mainly that the comparison with Pedro. In Pedro, currency is something that is done by a sovereign state, which doesn't have any kind of political, let's say, limitation on top of it. So they can just use Maduro's database. While in this case, in theory, you have a political organization that has another political organization, the Spanish national state, which will prevent them from doing something. So the theoretical use of technology could be interesting. Just not this.
Sure. I mean, all the Spanish government has to do is say, yeah, your ion token is illegal, and now what are you gonna do, right? Now now it's even worse because you're gonna have all of these international investors because you just created a security. So now you're gonna have all of these investors, including people from the United States and all these other ones, and then the Spanish government is gonna come down and say, yeah, you don't just get to circumvent our laws because Ethereum exists. And now whichever idiots created the ION token can now get internationally sued for selling a security overseas.
Yeah, now they are breaking the US federal laws, and they can just call Vitalik in order to unroll all the tokens eventually if they need it.
I like when you guys have differing points, and yeah, it's very interesting. And just, you know, as a background, it's utilities. I mean, it's a background that technically has always been, you know, a natural monopoly. And for anyone, you know, in econ, right, it's just a natural monopoly is a monopoly in an industry in which it's like usually high infrastructural costs or other barriers to entry are relative to the size of the market. And the governments allow that supplier in that industry to have that advantage over the other ones, except for this doesn't make that much sense anymore, actually, because plug and play solar systems, as you have a solar panel, are actually really affordable right now. So I agree, actually, to your point, Giacomo, and also to your point, Tone, regarding governments, is that I mean, Catalonia, I think, is probably being hindered by all these regulations in Madrid. I hope that, you know, they're able to fix that situation. But, you know, so it's, I think, quite evident that solar is being backed by, you know, held back by the regulators, not by the technology right now. But correct, this form of this ERC20 token ION makes absolutely no sense for any of this innovation to take place, nor do I think it's really the right mode of trying to push for more independence or breaking away, such as how the article states it, unless you guys disagree.
Right. I mean, if you need the token, if you absolutely need the token for functionality, which again would be stupid to outsource, you know, your electric grid to Ethereum. But if you absolutely need that token for functionality, just peg it to 1 kilowatt now and not having because the 1 kilowatt of energy is already fluctuating in price every single second because there's an open market for energy. So why are you going to add another currency that also fluctuates in price based on a lot more speculation because of 12-year-olds trading on like Bittrex than 1 actual kilowatt of energy? Like, it's just like, it's hard to explain the stupidity in this model.
All right, and on to India. And for someone in the live chat, no, this is being launched by the Catalan government. So not correct. So
yeah, I'm trying for the first time. I'm really trying to read the live chat as well, but I don't know how do you do that because I mean, two tasks contemporaries. I cannot talk and read, but I will try.
Good, you're the smart one.
The live chat was so much worse. I put in a 1 message per 45-second limit on everyone. You should have seen it before.
So
bad artificial limits, like 1 megabyte.
Exactly. I have a cap on messages. It's thank God for the centralized YouTube system.
The day that I didn't like that was when I was making stupid pizza jokes and asked everybody for jokes, and they'd like start it, and it came like so much later, the punchline, and it was tough. So sorry, a little sick. India rejects Venezuela's offer of 30% discount in oil sales using the Petro. So very simply, you know, this has been in the news a lot. We've been following RBI, and now they've declined this. So formally, the government of India rejected Venezuela's state-backed cryptocurrency. When they announced this about, I think, a month ago, we covered it on the show. And obviously that was an attempt to incite India. It's funny because that when it first came out, they said they had a bunch of countries around the world that are already on board. And we made a little bit of a hypothesis that probably wasn't correct. So, right, specifically though, I found this interesting that the Indian foreign minister said, quote, "We cannot have any trade in cryptocurrency as it is banned by the RBI." That was how they, I think, probably evaded that. But Tony, this is on the heels of a lot of RBI news that we've covered, and they didn't take the deal. What was your take on this story?
Well, I believe we had this one. We said about how dumb it was back when this story came up on our radar about a month ago. when they were saying that India is going to be buying, oil from Venezuela at a 30% discount. And this made absolutely no sense because, again, you don't need the petro. If you want to buy gas or if you want to buy oil from Venezuela, just give them any freaking currency. Any currency. They'll give you a 30% off. You can just say, hey, we got a suitcase full of US dollars. Can we buy oil? Can we buy your oil at a 30% discount? And they'll be more than happy to sell it to you, right? Like this concept of the petro. The problem isn't the medium of exchange here. The problem is that it's Venezuela. Okay, that's the problem. The other problem is that the government is not going to do something illegal. So if the U.S. has sanctions on Venezuelan oil, the country that India needs to be dealing with is probably the U.S. unless they want to ruin their relationship with the U.S. Right? Look, it's unfortunate. I don't really. I don't like these kinds of sanctions. But this concept of the euro is ridiculous. Not to mention. For India, if they even wanted to entertain this idea, I believe this is what I said a month ago, them going into some crazy currency, the petro, converting into the petro, then using it for the dollars can cost them more than 30% because this thing isn't exactly liquid. Like this never made sense from the beginning, and can't believe it took this long for this article to come out.
Giacomo, what do you think?
The same. In this case, I'm completely aligned. It was, buy these things from me at my made-up price, so you can use that to buy my oil with a discount. But the problem is that you can manipulate the price of the pseudo money you are selling in the first place. So and even that, and even in that case, I mean, if you don't play these kind of games, don't use stupid made-up technologies. Just use a Google spreadsheet with Maduro on one side and the Indian government on the other.
Yeah, I think it's, I think we called it. All right. Well, this is interesting. We'll have a little fun. The IMF official.
One quick comment. Someone says that I misunderstand the point. The point is for the world wants to stop using US dollars to buy oil. So stop using US dollars to buy. No one is forcing you to use the US dollar to buy oil. I mean, people are crazy. Do you think the Venezuelans are going to accept the Indian rupees for their oil? Probably not. It's almost as bad as the Venezuelan currency, right? Come on. If someone offered euros to Venezuela, if someone offered, the Swiss franc to Venezuela, of course they'll take it. They'll find a way to convert that stuff. It's not that difficult. No one is forcing the world to use US dollars for the oil. I don't understand why people have these conspiracy theories.
Yes. So the IMF. So a deputy director for the IMF yesterday came out with actually a research report, of course, because IMF loves their research reports, full of jargon, that central banks need to offer quote unquote better fiat currencies in order to fend off any potential competition from cryptos. So specifically Dong He at the IMF, he specifically, it's just like he's urging central banks. And he's also saying that potentially their own cryptocurrencies focus on digital, etc. I'm just gonna, I know someone just said that I'm talking too much, but I'm a little riled up on this one because I used to work at the World Bank. So just gonna say there's a huge difference working at the World Bank, and I did like my time in the field, and at the IMF, and I really don't like the IMF, hugely critical. So two primary differences, starting this story off so that we know exactly what this story means is, I think, very important. So the IMF and the World Bank really have different purposes and functions. The IMF exists primarily to stabilize exchange rates. This is important for Italy as well, while the World Bank's goal is to reduce poverty. It's very, very different. So straight up, in terms of the original mandate, the IMF honestly has outlived their utility completely, because if everyone remembers, this was created in the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944. So it's utterly ridiculous. And often, like, what the IMF says and what they actually do is completely opposite. So ending on one thing is just like that when we discuss the IMF and when people, talk about Lagarde and everyone talks about G20, it's very, very important news, but also keep in mind just that like the IMF needs to be in the context of what's going on in the world today and what's going on when we talk about China and development banks around the world and other infrastructure projects pushed by other powerful countries. And they're really losing, I think, like their leverage. Like, and just saying like, you know, so for countries, and last point on this is just in Italy, is like for countries that borrow money from the IMF, what the IMF says can change the decisions of the government, right? And affect financial markets. But point number one, potentially, you know, when countries are receiving only advice and not money, how much leverage can the IMF actually have, right? Personal opinion. And just because information is publicly available, which is what they're doing and putting out their reports, that doesn't mean that it's going to make their way to the policymakers. They just do like a report card and recommendations. And lastly, which got me a little riled up, is just that like the information in these reports are so much jargon and often not even readable that like, yes, the IMF is undeniably important regarding Washington consensus and its history. And we will argue this point probably right now, but I do think people need to always understand the background of the IMF, where it sits today, and that there are definitely issues on how governments, especially if they don't need the money, will react to statements made by them. Financial markets can be a bit different. Okay, done with that. Sorry, guys. Tone, I'll turn it to you. Actually, I want to turn this one to Giacomo. Giacomo, what did you think about the story, especially in light of on the heels of Italy yesterday, and we were discussing central banks?
So I think that it is true that in a way, central bank will have to compete with Bitcoin. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. What I think they're not yet getting is that from what I see in the article, it's like they think that they will have to compete in the fields of technology or techno US, or that's not the case. The centralized technology is already perfect for central banks. They will be called to compete, but they will not be able to compete. And now I will explain why that's the case, in my opinion, on other two things, which is one, the underlying value of the money. They will Bitcoin is a new digital gold standard, even better than the gold standard because the supply is not even elastic, is inelastic supply. So the perfect digital gold. Do you want to compete with that as a resistance to political manipulation and as good monetary features? Just peg your currency with physical gold. That's I mean, or use some kind of finite supply algorithm in your central bank databases. You don't need any blockchain or cryptography or hashing power. All these things were needed by Bitcoin only because Bitcoin was made in order to avoid government censorship. But if you are the central bank, you will not suffer government censorship. So you don't have to adopt the crypto technology. You should just adopt the crypto gold standard. And the second part is openness, permissionlessness, and let's say financial inclusion and privacy. So with Bitcoin, everybody can transmit money to everybody without filling out paperwork, without censorship. I can donate to WikiLeaks, and I cannot do that with euro or US dollar over traditional payment circuits. So central bank, do you want to compete about that? Because you think that potentially globally, the open permissionless market is bigger than the permissioned closed market, which is the case in the long run. So you just have to open up. In a way, central banks could destroy Bitcoin or make Bitcoin almost irrelevant with just two simple tricks. They should just stop using the central bank power in order to devaluate currency and in order to censor or monitor or track financial transactions. Why can, if you think about that, think about music, exchange of peer-to-peer music. So we had Napster. Napster was a centralized solution, a little bit like e-gold in the case of money. It had some interesting properties, namely that you could just download music for free without any kind of restriction, but it was legally fragile because it was centralized. So the governments shut down Napster. Now we had BitTorrent. BitTorrent is and was impossible to shut down because it was decentralized, a very good piece of technology. So now people can and will be able indefinitely to exchange music for free, circumventing any kind of regulation. So right now, what is happening is that many musical or video content major are just trying to lose down their effort to keep digital, to keep intellectual property protection and digital right management. And so you have Netflix, and you have a lot of YouTube free content. You have online streaming, partly even illegal, but the intellectual property rights are not enforced anymore. So if the system loses on the things that they are doing, they do kill Bitcoin, because they make Bitcoin useless, because you can just use the normal institutional good old form of money. So why they can't? They can because central banking manipulation and financial surveillance are needed in order to are needed for the financial surviving of national states. If the European Central Bank stopped to do currency manipulation, they couldn't buy failed nation states debt, like in the case of Italy. They couldn't do LTRO. The Fed couldn't do quantitative easing. If they cannot inflate and manipulate the currency, governments will just fall down under the weight of their spending, which is something unsustainable. And if they cannot track down and censor financial transactions, then they will not be able to properly tax people and distort money anymore. So the only way, the simple way they would have to compete with Bitcoin would be just to be closer to Bitcoin, but they cannot, because their own job is to do exactly the opposite.
Yeah, very interesting. Tone, you actually spoke to this subject on Cheddar yesterday. What are your thoughts on what Giacomo just said?
Well, it's not. I mean, I agree with Giacomo, but I was just going to add to it in that specifically to this article. It's just like this whole article is just a giant contradiction of itself, right? So they start out by saying, well, cryptocurrencies are a problem because they circumvent a lot of our regulation and a lot of our, economy puppeteering with interest rates and the printing of money. So we need to increase the regulations on cryptocurrencies. In which case it's very, very possible to do with everything other than Bitcoin, right? I mean, you can regulate Ethereum out of existence. That shouldn't be too hard. It's very difficult to do with Bitcoin, right? You can certainly regulate ICOs, make them illegal. I mean, these are all centralized entities. So anything that's centralized can completely be regulated away until those entities become the government, right? And then they can make themselves legal unless they grow big enough, right? I mean, you can't regulate the internet companies out of existence now because they're some of the biggest companies we have. They'll basically, they become the, they become in control of the government almost because they're so big to the economy. So, however, with Bitcoin, you can't do that. But this article is a walking contradiction because they start talking about how bad cryptocurrencies are and they need to disappear. But then they talk about, well, we're going to have our own cryptocurrency. And here's the best part. So if you go to that little, so it says or he also, because like, I don't know if that's the guy's last name or just saying, all right, that one, yeah. He also pointed out that you can have a government currency that's going to act peer-to-peer. No, you can't, right? Because the top of that article talks about how cryptocurrency is so bad because of money laundering and because we don't know where the money is going. But that's what peer-to-peer functions are, right? Like, no, you can't have that, right? If you want to compete with Bitcoin, then you don't want to double down on the money laundering laws. You don't want to double down on the regulation of money transfer. You want to relax the money laundering laws. You want to eliminate the money laundering laws. You want to allow people to spend money any way that they like. And then you end up in a situation of what's a better currency, a deflationary currency like Bitcoin or an inflationary currency like government fiat, right? But at least now you're arguing over economics and not over, laws on the way people spend their money, right? There are two things there. Like it would be a very, very interesting competition of what's better money that is managed by, people like the economic PhDs that get to influence monetary policy and provide liquidity in times of, financial stress, versus money that is hard money that you cannot print to bail out institutions. I would love to have that experiment play out. The problem is you can't have this experiment play out because of money laundering laws. Money laundering laws is what's driving Bitcoin, not the fact that it's a currency that is, like gold and is finite versus a currency that is infinite. It would be very interesting to see what would actually win. Now, I will say that governments will always print their currency in an irresponsible way, so they will eventually lose. But it will be interesting what happens during, let's say, a liquidity crisis or during a new 2008 crisis, and you have two types of money to choose from, one that is providing liquidity with money printing and one that isn't. It would be an interesting experiment. I just wish this experiment would have an even playing field with no money laundering laws involved.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I agree. And for another contradiction, right? A central bank-run crypto asset in itself is also a contradiction. I thought the whole thing was ill-informed and very funny in that. But it's the IMF. So Giacomo, any last thoughts? Otherwise, to finish off our little politics Bitcoin news brief, do you want to tell us, just the latest on who was elected and his ties to Bitcoin?
So after the Italian government watched yesterday's morning brief, of course, and in which I explained that the situation was at a stale because the president of the republic didn't want to appoint a government where the Ministry of the Economy was Professor Savona, because Professor Savona is against the euro, and that was a no-go for the European establishment and for the president of the Republic of Italy. So after they did reach an agreement that basically still include the same prime minister, which is this unknown guy promoted by the Five-Star Movement, and there is still Professor Savona inside the government, but in another position, basically a very not very powerful ministry of generic relationship with the European Union. So he is not at the economies anymore. And this guy was actually the president of a Bitcoin-related startup that was incubated in my Milan accelerator. They are not really doing Bitcoin, but it's very funny that this guy was the face, not really, I don't think involved at any practical level, but it was the face of a Bitcoin startup, Euclid. So that's funny in a way. It shows that at least this is a guy that is keen to exploring monetary stuff, included euro exit ideas. So I think that what the agreement means is that they gave to the president of the republic strong guarantees that they are not going to do anything seriously disruptive about the eurozone. We will see. For everything else, I think it's bad news. The economic policies of movement five stars are crazy, like citizenship wage for everybody, and and prison for tax avoiders, but Italians' problem.
Thanks, Giacomo. It's very interesting, his pro-Bitcoin background. And again, he's a professor.
So just to clarify, he is not strictly pro-Bitcoin. Oh. I remember some exchange in which he was a little bit pro-blockchain, anti-Bitcoin. Let's say that he is experienced in the field of Bitcoin somehow.
Well, since the Italian government was listening to our Bitcoin morning brief yesterday and you talking about it, maybe he's listening again today and we can convert him to become a Bitcoin maximalist potentially. On to a bit of sad news. Tone, what happened with Matthew?
Unfortunately, Matthew Mellon has passed away. He has been in the crypto space for a while. He's a big advocate of Bitcoin. Then he got into Ripple. I met him personally several times, tried to convince him that Ripple doesn't really make sense. But yeah, he passed away. People knew that he, had a bit of a drug addiction and, wasn't really living the healthiest lifestyle. And it's unfortunate, and it looks like a pretty big crypto fortune has died with him. So there you go, guys. If you haven't, considered what happens to your crypto when you're holding on to your own keys, if something happens to you, then you really should think about it. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add.
Giacomo, anything that you wanted to add?
No, the same. It's really the crypto inheritance is a very sensitive topic, and many of the people involved in this kind of trading or hodling now are not thinking about this. There is a great speaker and lawyer and expert in this matter, Pamela Morgan, is going around many conferences explaining how to put in place some kind of inheritance mechanism on crypto, both on the legal side and the technical side. Because of course we can think that with Bitcoin we own our own money, so we can all just create a multi-sig with an unlock time or a check lock time verify and do some fancy cryptographic style. But the reality is that in many cases the heirs will not have the technical capability to use any kind of complex technical disposition. So it's very important also to have some kind of legal plan in place that can back up in case of technical fuck up, which is mostly likely.
Yeah, and do check out Pamela Morgan's work at Third Key Solutions for this. But like Giacomo said, there's a little caveat here, right? Like, what happens when your crypto is off the grid? What happens when that crypto isn't registered? What happens then? And I don't think there are good solutions for that scenario.
Does this mean, Tom, that you're going to have a pretty intense prenup when you get married?
Well, it could also mean I don't even need one, right?
That's very true. All right. Who controls Bitcoin? Don't we all want to know? And Vortex is going to...
Isn't he starting in like 2 minutes?
Yes, 10 a.m. No, Pacific Standard. So what is it? Yeah. Okay.
Congratulations, Vortex. You're 2 minutes away from your presentation.
Yes, and it's his first talk. And it's titled "Who Controls Bitcoin?" Pretty awesome. And if you guys are in LA, run over there now. Like just over to Century City.
Over LA traffic and to get there in 2 minutes.
Yeah, and so Tone and I retweeted it. It's also right here on Vortex's, but yes, it is right now. So so get over there as soon as possible. All right, Tone, TA?
Sure. Oh man, I like.
So EOS is gonna launch this weekend.
Oh, EOS is launching this weekend. All right, maybe we'll if I you know what? Well, I'll go live around that time. I'm curious what the hell happens. We'll check that out. Man, I'm tempted to bring up, like, people went nuts. Like everyone thinks that if a country stops using US dollars to buy the oil, then the US is gonna go and bomb that country. Like this is the mental mentality of most of the people in our chat. Yet somehow using crypto for your oil solves this problem.
Yeah, and on that, everybody should follow the news. There's very intense tariffs right now, but I don't see any bombing.
Well, like, obviously, I don't buy into that conspiracy theory. But if you buy into that conspiracy theory, I'm sorry, guys, crypto is not going to solve that problem.
Exactly. Even if you did, I mean, if an American government is not going to let you use euro for oil, how could they let you use petro for oil, which is even more difficult to access? Maybe Bitcoin can mitigate the problem if you start to sell oil in the black market.
And probably easier to track considering how liquid petrol is compared to the US dollar.
Exactly, that's crazy.
Correct.
Like if you have two banks, right? If you have two banks that are not on the US SWIFT system, they can transfer those dollars to each other, and US has no idea. Or any other currency for that matter.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Oh man.
Maybe pull up price of oil today.
All right.
Oil futures.
Okay, what am I doing? Oh yeah, I was
Probably bringing up your website.
So just like Leah just suggested, let's talk about Leah's latest article of Bitcoin. Let me be perfectly clear. So this was actually a really good read. Giacomo, you read it, right?
Yeah, I read it and I loved it. I tweeted it, I shared it on Twitter yesterday. Very, very good. Very, very also poetic. I mean, I agree with the content, but I would never be able to put this content in this kind of artistic way. So it's great read.
Yeah, so I have to point something very specific out, something that I have not considered. So
What?
Yeah. So this is actually really good. So I mean, we did talk about the whole concept of the MVP, right? Like move fast and like break stuff. And obviously, this is a dumb idea when it comes to money. It's a good idea when it comes to, trying to figure out how you're going to make money with your company. It's a good idea, when you're actually trying to create, usable technology that doesn't like delete people's money if you screw up. It's good, but it's not really good for money. But what you said in this article that I found really, really interesting, now that more and more emphasis and more value is being placed on all of this nonsense, like EOS that's going to launch this weekend, screw-ups in something like EOS reflect badly on the entire ecosystem, including Bitcoin, right? So if something like Ethereum blows up, which I expect it to do, that could cause a major confidence drain onto Bitcoin from people that aren't aware of the internal situation that knew that Ethereum is going to implode. So from an outside perspective looking in, when an exchange gets hacked because they were stupid enough to have NAM on their system, and NAM gets hacked for $500 million, a person unfamiliar with the fact that NAM is an outright scam would think that Bitcoin is just as vulnerable on that exchange. Bitcoin probably was just as vulnerable, right? But in a lot of these situations, as more and more of these move fast and break things, stupid initiatives blow up in people's faces and more people get scammed by all of these ICOs and altcoins, it reflects badly on Bitcoin as well, in a way, losing confidence in the entire crypto system that Bitcoin is a part of. And this gives me even more ammo in we're in a downtrend of a bear market movement, because right now I'm still seeing way too much influence of, garbage like EOS.
Thanks.
Yeah, if I can just make the last joke before the technical analysis, I would say that the EOS is an example of a shitcoin, of scam coin that doesn't go so fast breaking things. Indeed, it goes so slow and so conservative that basically they just reuse the same code base of BitShare. So EOS is a giant ICO which raised the millions, basically renaming the first scam of Larimer, the BitShare code base. You can actually, I can just give you the link. I will give it to Leah.
And they couldn't even get that right. There was that giant vulnerability a few days ago that almost that could have rendered the entire EOS system useless. Well, let me rephrase that. Scratch that. That could have rendered the entire EOS system to what it actually is.
Yeah.
All right. Price talk. Let's do it. All right. Where am I here? What is that? I don't want to click on something. I'm not sure what it is. Okay. So Liberty Life Trail still exists, especially the Learn Trading section is still useful. tonevase.com. Please check that out. My travel schedule, I will be in Dublin a week from today for a workshop, then London. I actually should probably find places to stay in these areas. I haven't even looked for an Airbnb yet. Then Montreal, a few seats are being sold in Montreal, and Berlin. Let's see if anyone signs up, because I thought I heard something about Bitcoin being popular in Berlin. I guess Germans aren't as, degenerate gamblers, like especially people in the UK, apparently, that are planning to attend the trading workshop. Let me move this out of the way. All right, let's look at the price. We're hanging in there at 7,400. Once again, nothing has changed. I know people like desperately wait for these things every day, but like I'm not going to say anything today that I didn't say yesterday. I continue to believe that the current week really resembles the week of 2014, August 18th of 2014. It was a little, bullish week after a bad bearish week that took you below the 50-week moving average. Now, what happened the following 6 weeks is 6 weeks of downside. Am I expecting 6 straight weeks of downside after the current week? Probably not, mostly because we are now pretty far below the 7-week moving average, and we're very far below the 30-week moving average. So it's possible that we're not going to be as weak as of next week as we were back in August. It's possible, but probably not. I still think when I pull up the 12-hour chart, like I did the other day, I still think it's possible for us to, make an even cleaner symmetric triangle by the price moving into the $8,000 area. Would I place a bet on the price moving to the $8,000 area? Probably not. In such a bear market, I would either stay in cash, hold on my Bitcoin to infinity, or look for shorting opportunities. So so I do have this red line here, but this red line was there from before the final drop to 7,000. This red line currently makes no sense. I will drop this red line down to 7,050. I would say that if the price of Bitcoin drops below 7,050, it becomes a very, I think the fall would definitely accelerate. Where would I consider, if it continues going up, where would there be shorting opportunities? Well, at some kind of resistance. At the moment, we are taking our time trying to get to the $7,700 area. So if we can get to that $7,700 area like today, that could be a decent short off of the combination of this prior red line that I had on the 30 period moving average on the 12-hour. But we're probably not going to get there today. So now you might have to wait for you to run into the 50 period moving average. I also kind of bypassed the daily chart. The daily chart, I have a line here from before. This is the prior breakdown point at 79.50, which could be a combination of that and the 30-day moving average. And above, I have the 128-day moving average, I believe is the blue. I can probably turn that into the 50-day moving average because I'm curious where that is. Oops, wrong thing. Let's talk about the moving averages. Let's take a look at where the 50-day moving average is. Oh, and we just had a death cross a couple of days ago. So the 50 is probably about to turn down. And look, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a huge struggle. I think that if it starts to go up from here, just like throughout this mini bull run between April and May, this 1 month run, I kept saying that the price will reverse hard any moment. And it eventually did. Now, because it reversed after a $4,000 move in the price of Bitcoin, it didn't have the momentum to take you all the way down to below 6,000. But the next time we turned the corner somewhere between current prices and 10,000, and it's very difficult to pick that spot. I mean, if you're an active trader, you learn some of these technical analysis tools. I may not be able to help you here. I mean, I would use the sequential system, and I would try to time it off of 9s. And on a weekly chart, we are still on a 3 of 9, so waiting for probably 6 more weeks of downside. The daily chart is barely in the green, but if there was a bullish trade taken on here, I'm probably already getting bored with this trade. The 12-hour chart on the sequential, let's see what we have. Again, you are price flipping now, I believe. Yeah, you're in the middle of yet a second price flip. We can take a look and see if there's not going to be any divergence here, because you needed a lower low in price to see divergence. The MACD is neutral. The RSI is neutral. There's not really much going on. Your 4-hour chart is stuck in a range. Your CMF is trending to the upside, so that's good. Your MACD is trending to the upside. Your RSI is trending to the upside, not overbought yet. So the 4-hour chart looks like it can pop one more time, but it can just as likely go down. I would just, wait for either a breakout above 76, 77, but even that area on different time frames is resistance. So it's very difficult to time your bullish trades here unless they're absolutely perfect. And had the daily chart made it down to a 9, it would have given me a nice tradable bounce to time to the upside, off of the combination of this setup trend line, this descending trend line. If this candle was to the downside, the following candle would have given you a nice buying opportunity based on exhaustion, but it reversed a little early for my taste. So I would not chase it to the upside here, and I would rather, time the drops to the downside. That's pretty much it. The 1-hour chart is not really showing you anything. Just for my curiosity, here's the price of gold, still stuck doing nothing, not interesting. The weekly NASDAQ is breaking out. The NASDAQ is almost back to its all-time high. Soon I'm sure you'll have another hyperwave video, right, Leah, with Tyler?
For sure.
Right. I'm curious what he thinks, because the NASDAQ is on the edge of a new all-time high, while the S&P is a basket case compared to the NASDAQ. So it's really, really weird. Like, NASDAQ is almost at its all-time high, and the S&P is still stuck at a second lower high, which is really, really weird. Here's the daily S&P. I still believe the S&P is going to break out. The moment the S&P goes above this red dotted line, which is the setup trend line at 2765, I become fully bullish the S&P. But based on everything you see in this chart, I have to be fully bullish the NASDAQ. And I remain a stock market bull. And I've been fighting these, perma bears of the stock market and forever. And the ultimate irony is the same people that have been expecting the price of the stock market to crash for 10 years in a row now, because the crash of 08 wasn't big enough for them, right? They've been expecting a crash in the S&P for 10 years in a row. These same people think that Bitcoin can never crash, but the S&P is supposed to crash every year. And it's the same people. And guys, they're both private assets. They should be more correlated than not correlated. You can't hate the stock market and love Bitcoin, because for the same reason that people put their money into Bitcoin, they put their money into Google and Amazon for the same reason. Anyway, it's really amazing how some people think.
Well, we have our weekly close pretty soon, so for sure. And maybe traditional markets this weekend, Tom?
Yeah, maybe. I should be around.
All right, that sounds good. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you're in LA, you maybe missed 15 minutes of Vortex, but get your butt over to Century City. Have a great weekend. Happy Friday. Giacomo, are you gonna have some pizza later?
Yeah. We were noticing that a lot of people wants to have pizza with me in Italy. So probably I will just quit Bitcoin and pivot to a pizzeria, crypto-based pizzeria. Expect ICO soon.
Awesome. Awesome. Pizza coin. Tone, what's today look like for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, like right after my little rant on the stock market, someone put a comment in the live chat. Sorry, Tone, if you think the stock market can still go up, you're delusional. I've heard this comment said to me for the last 5 years. I've been talking about the markets publicly now since 2014. So it's already been 4 years. Privately before that for a couple of years. I've been a bull on the stock market ever since my very first, writings about the market in 2014, starting out in Cointelegraph about Bitcoin. I've been bullish the stock market this entire time, the last 4 years. And this comment, if you think the stock market is going to go $1 higher, you're delusional. I've heard this like every day of my life for the last 4 years, and I'm still hearing it. It's really fascinating.
All right, yeah, and you probably shouldn't mess with someone whose background is risk analysis specifically. But only time will tell. Also on your Doug Polk bet, what is it called? Blindsight, what, like looking back is 2020. Oh man, I'm gonna get this one
Hindsight's 2020.
Thank you. Okay, you're the host. All right, everybody, have a great day. Thanks so much.
Hey, good luck trading out there, guys.